The knight's eyes shot open, and he instinctively filled his starved lungs with a titanic gasp, grappling with the sensation of nearly drowning. This wasn't the battlefield. What had happened? Where were his fellow knights? Where was his king? The hooded figure standing beside him jumped back with a jolt, shocked by the unexpected sudden reaction. The knight didn't even notice the hooded figure, as his mind raced, trying to recollect what had happened to him, how he ended up here, and what here even was. The knight could feel he was laying on a cold metallic slab, yet he was unable to move as he continued to breathe deeply and swiftly. He felt so heavy, so foreign in his own skin. He had to calm down. He had to think. Look around, he told himself. Control yourself. You're alive. You're alive. The knight closed his eyes and focused on his body. He was freezing cold on the metallic table. His armor was gone, and he was nearly naked in the dark, vast stone room. Looking up, he could see candles burning from the walls and ceiling. The small window showed a dark sky. The knight went to test his heavy body. Slowly he tried to lift his arm. Nothing happened. He felt nothing except the cold darkness surrounding him. Moving his focus to his feet, cold in the moist air of the dark stone chamber, he shifted all his focus to his toes, using his will to move them, sending the signals down his body. He felt nothing but numbness. Trying and failing to move any other part of his body, the knight began to panic. The hooded figure sucked his teeth and sneered at the frightened knight before moving to his work table, set up on the opposite side of the room. Horrible, the voice hissed. As the figure turned, the knight caught a brief glimpse of his face from the light of some of the candles. He was so young. The knight watched as the young man, a man younger than himself, shuffled through some old books and scrolls, and cleaned off his hands of a red substance, what the knight could only assume was blood. Whoever this was, the knight decided, despite the bit of venom from the figure, and the disinterest in his peril, despite the strange surroundings, somehow felt safe here. Strangely, the boy in the hood looked oddly familiar. He just couldn't place him. All of this, the strange room, the feel of the table, even the tools to which this young man devoted his attention to now, called to a memory he couldn't recollect. "You," he called out to the boy. "What has happened here?" The knight's question was met with an unexpectedly nonchalant tone. "I brought you back to life," he whispered, and promptly returned to his cleaning and sorting of the various tools of his trade. He needed to be shocked, off balance. "What?" the knight exclaimed. He would have leapt off the table if he could move. He certainly wanted to. "Brought me back to life?" Surely he misheard this young man. Given his current state, he was certainly mistaken. He had to be. "Yes, Gregor," the young man answered, lowering his hood to reveal a mess of blonde curls and emerald green eyes. He was curious. He wanted answers. Good. The knight's eyes grew from the shock of hearing his name coming from the stranger. "You know my name?" "Of course I do," the young man nodded. Seeing how distraught the knight was, and remembering it likely wouldn't matter in the end, he offered up his. "My name is Dagda," he said with a bow before returning to his work. Gregor closed his eyes. He was a knight of the king, so it only made sense people would know his name. The worst thing he had to handle now was grappling with the fact he was brought back from the dead. He had to keep asking questions. "All right, Dagda." Gregor feigned bravery in his complete vulnerability. "Can you tell me what happened? Why am I here?" They always had questions. Dagda couldn't blame them, really. If he was in their place... Dagda couldn't even finish the thought. He hadn't wanted to go against his training. When he came to understand the unique healing program he was summoned for, it was already too late to leave. Dagda had to admit he certainly had a gift for magic and healing, yet he never imagined he would be forced to do something so horrible. His gifts slowly became what cursed him. He was trapped here. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. He tried to follow the mantra, Do your job and nothing else. Plant no seeds. The mantra his tutor had him chant after each lesson. The idea was simple enough, yet Dagda couldn't help but feel pity for these poor men. He never understood why they had to be so cold to these frightened warriors. A part of the process was making sure they remembered nothing of this ordeal, yet like his tutor had told him, seeds could be planted. In this time, this brief time before the healer arrived, it was as if they were in a dream, prone to outside influence. Dagda saw this as an opportunity. You were badly hurt on the battlefield. You require some intense healing, Dagda explained. You said I was dead, Gregor accused. This is more than a little healing. Dagda stood still, the candlelight playing with the shadows on his face. He knew how monstrous he must look to this newly arisen knight. You're a necromancer, aren't you? This one was smarter than he had given him credit for. Dagda did not want to confirm the suspicions, yet couldn't dodge the question. Tactfully, he answered how he was trained to answer. I am only a dream, knight. The lack of answer was more than enough to convince Gregor that he was right in his suspicions. Am I to be your slave now? Gregor remembered tales of necromancers from his childhood, the ungodly puppet masters of the dead, the purveyors of dark magic, the monsters who could take down the world only with their will and undead armies, if they so chose. They were dangerous people. The king would have to know about this. Gregor's words made Dagda feel like ice had been injected into his blood. Dagda shook his head, feeling a sting of shame. The burden the horrible legends and mythologies thrust upon him. His work spoke for itself. Your will is your own, Gregor. He could feel his voice wanting to crack. You are a servant only to our king. Yet more seeds. A better one this time. A seed of a half-truth was better than the awful truth Dagda's magic would work on this night, like many times he had done before. It would be up to him to determine which ones would grow. The magic should already be working on him now. It would only be a matter of time before it completely took hold. If the king was awake, the knight would know soon enough. As much as Dagda hated it, he had to do his job. He had to give these men over to the king. From deep in his mind, Gregor could sense the voice of his king, sending out orders to his troops. The voice was there, quiet, yet couldn't be ignored. My king? Gregor felt the world fall from underneath him. He was no servant to a greater cause in the eyes of his king. He was a tool. He was a toy. His will was gone. Dagda had lied to him. Gregor stiffened his face, his gaze moving up to the dark stone ceiling. He didn't even acknowledge the healer as the door creaked and she burst through to greet Dagda. He didn't ask any more questions, didn't look around, didn't make a fuss, or inquire as to what magic the healer was now using on him to stitch and sew his fatal wounds. Dagda saw the knight's heart break from the truth of his existence. He had granted the knight an indulgence he probably shouldn't have, potentially planted a seed of discourse in the subconscious of the knight. Dagda felt a pang of panic in his stomach as he watched a tear slowly escape the stern-faced knight's eye. A sign of a wound he had hoped to heal soon. They were both at the mercy of another. If the king found out, he would be in a lot of trouble. Dagda was trained to move in the shadows, to not accommodate the ones he had to work on, yet he couldn't help it. He had held on to the empathy, which would make his job all the more difficult. He had only ever wanted to help people, and now his talents had led him down this dark path. Yet he could plant these seeds. He'd have to work on this if he was going to be successful in his job. Dagda was determined to start here. Focusing his magic, Dagda slowly let out a breath and rubbed his hands together. The dark green swirls of power appeared in his hands, and Dagda concentrated all of it into his index and middle fingers. The spell of forgetfulness. As the healer worked, paying no mind to Dagda and what he had to do, he moved behind Gregor. You'll feel better in no time, he whispered down to the unhearing and heartbroken knight. Gently, Dagda pressed his fingers into Gregor's temples, letting the magic pour into his mind. Gregor closed his eyes. He would awaken in his own bed, healed and ready to serve again. No matter what else happened during the healing process, he would make absolutely certain Gregor would forget most of this. He had to, under order of His Majesty the King.